Hello, it's Joyful Hermit. I'm starting to recover more and more, drinking more water, more coconut water, whatever, trying to help get the illness out and get energy back. Um, got a load of laundry out on the clothesline, even though it's a very cold day, the wind is whipping. So that's a start. I've been thinking about spiritual friendship, and it's come up in context of a diocese. Well, it's a religious order that offers um, spiritual direction via lay people um, for anyone who wants, and it's highly encouraged. I was encouraged even though the priest didn't know me, because I think they are offering that service through their order for anyone, and it's very lovely. But I was told it was just a matter of being accompanied by, with spiritual friendship was the idea I had. And I thought the woman and I were going to have lunch together or a cup of coffee or something for this accompaniment or spiritual friendship. And then it changed over to a more formal office setting. And I did ask lots, and a cup of tea in the office, and questions asked, and um, I asked questions also, and the person was very free about sharing her life and background, and I found there really wasn't a commonality too much or experiential background in either of my vocations, the hermit life, the aromatic vocation, or that of victim soul, which technically isn't a vocation, but it is a description or a name for those who suffer and have a particular calling to suffer from Jesus, to suffer with Jesus on behalf of the church and for souls, for reparation for the world also. So she was unfamiliar with that, and unfamiliar with many people of the aromatic tradition, etc. And the background was, no credentials in counseling or that type of educational background. So I also was very bored with my spiritual life when asked questions, and I would be nice and describe things, especially like the state at Mass. She had been with me during Mass. And some of my experiences from whence I came, some of the hardships and the difficulties. And I was just bored with my own spiritual life at this point, I guess, in my progression. And decided that it really wasn't for me at all. The situation wasn't. And I started thinking more later then about spiritual friendship and accompanying each other along the way. I also realized that the position was a paid position, and for me it just didn't seem what the early desert fathers or mothers would have done. I mean, people would bring uh, food or material goods for staying there at their huts or whatever, but I have never been one to think about having payment for sharing spiritual wisdom or insights given by God, or to accompany each other along the spiritual way. And I guess that was just something that I hadn't considered, and it doesn't feel right to me. However, I know that there are people who go through short courses within the church. Sometimes religious orders offer them for what they call spiritual certification, maybe 1 year of meeting once a month with people to train them a little bit in some of the basics of counseling. Since I have over half a doctorate in clinical psychology, and I was unable to finish that, I was into some internship hours, but I had about 55 hours of coursework. And I guess I'm just familiar enough with countertransference and transference in the counseling process. And it also seemed to me that a lot of it could go to the head, especially in spiritual counseling of other people, when one doesn't have the experiential background in various aspects of the spiritual life that they might encounter in quote-unquote accompanying others along the spiritual way. So I got to thinking about my spiritual friends, and I realized, well, I have people who accompany me and people I can call upon who are longtime spiritual friends. And our friendship is free of charge, and it's not in an office setting, and I considered also how it evolved. And it evolved very naturally from the grace of God. One couple in particular saw me at Mass. This was probably 5 years before the state started happening, or at least 4 years, and noticed I was sitting alone and struck up a conversation with me. We hit it off. We ended up going to dinner. They loved Chinese food. I suffered through sitting, had a spinal headache later as a result of it, but sometimes you make trade-offs. And it evolved from there, and we've been friends ever since, at least 10 years. So they moved away. We still keep in contact. If I have spiritual issues in my life, I feel free to call or to email, and she and her husband discuss what I'm asking and give their feedback, which is always very wise. Even if it is something that I realize has answered my questions, but that is not what I am going to do, it's always valuable. It's always free, and they ask of me too. We discuss things or we share things. But there's never a questioning or an answering in any kind of a formal setting. And actually, the woman probably has more experience, especially with spiritual experiences, and probably more education in line with spiritual directing than the person that I met with under the more formal circumstances. So it's just something to consider. I also have Protestant friends who are very good with perspectives and spiritual and Christian insights that I value greatly. So I do like the idea of accompanying one another. I had left it open with this woman who I met recently, or met with, the urging of a priest, even though I realized the priest didn't quite get it, that the person wouldn't have experience in what I have experienced. And I left it open to the woman that if we are truly, seeking to accompany each other, that I would love to have spiritual friendship, but not in the formal setting and not as part of her quote-unquote job or work for which she is paid by the religious order, well, obviously by people's donations. So we'll see. I haven't heard from her, and I did note that she had mentioned we would have lunch or something like that, when instead it ended up being in her office. And there was a sense of positioning, of having to sort of drop names or establish her position in the way that sometimes we women do. And it was just sort of awkward. I found myself even sort of dropping a bomb in and I later wrote and said it was so ridiculous of me that I was just reacting a little bit. I guess in the hope of just leveling the playing field and being accompanists to each other. But obviously that is not what is in mind in this situation. And spiritual friendships develop more spontaneously usually, and I think that when we get to a certain phase in our spiritual life, we're on the mountain or we're on the stairway to heaven, and less is there a side-by-side room or space for climbing. So that metaphor can be examined a little bit if you wish. Anyway, that's not to say that this person and I will not become spiritual friends. I guess I've sort of left it up to her purview and decision if there's any further contact or desire to meet or get to know one another, even via email. So we shall see. But the whole process did make me realize that I have many, many people who accompany me, and God willing, I accompany them. Plus, I have a couple of priests I can call upon who have known me for years. Should I have precise spiritual questions, and I also have Dr. H, who is very gifted in the paranormal and who's known me for 28 years, who I can call upon, even though we're far apart in miles. Should I have any paranormal experiences that I do not understand. But that hasn't really been the case for quite a while. Anyway, just some thoughts that I'm sharing on wonderful sunny late afternoon in my hovel house. God bless His real presence in you.